and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you. Hello, I'm Tom Dillon, and with me today is my colleague and podcast co-host Helen Leathers. How are you today, Helen?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am extremely well today. Thank
Excellent.
you very much. So today is the first of our question and answer, our Q&A sessions. We're going to be doing those on a regular basis. So if you do have a question around coaching that you want to ask us, the link to ask a question is in the show notes, and you'll be able to. We'd love to hear your questions. We have some already, but we'd like some more. So please feel free. So what questions do we have today, Helen?
Well, our first question this time is from Amy, who's a GP partner, and she'd like to know whether it's possible to coach colleagues who are in the same GP practice. What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are that it's incredibly difficult. It's possible, but it's incredibly difficult. So if we take the view that as a coach we're coming without any agenda and we're working with the person in front of us and their problems or their situation, it's very difficult if you're part of the same practice not to have your own agenda and not to steer the conversation towards what you want the outcome to be. So let's imagine you're a GP partner and one of your salaried GPs has a problem. You can't help but be influenced by what's going on for you within your practice. So let's say someone's talking about working less days a week. That's going to have an impact on you as a GP partner. So very difficult to be objective if you are part of the same system and working quite closely with someone else in the same practice. So I think it's perfectly possible to use coaching skills and to have good conversations that use a coaching approach, but recognizing that in order to have a formal coaching session with someone, you have to be able to be objective. And I'm not sure that's possible working with close colleagues.
So if you have an attachment to the outcome, that's an issue.
Yep.
And there's also the issue of confidentiality, of course.
Absolutely. So confidentiality for me is sacred. I'm not going to reveal anything that anyone tells me within the coaching room. But of course, again, if you were a GP partner and one of your salaried GPs is telling you something they're doing and you don't quite agree with it, how likely are you to keep that to yourself and not talk to another GP partner? It's possible, but I want to turn up to my coaching assuring the person in front of me that everything we talk about is confidential and that it's not going to leave the room. And again, I'm not sure if you're coaching colleagues, you can make that assurance. Because once they've told you what they tell you, you can't unknow.
Mm. So if you want to adopt a coaching culture in your practice, as Amy seems to want to, how can you do that without these clashes?
I think a good answer to that perhaps is to team up with another practice. So if you've got a GP federation, perhaps ask other practices if they adopt a coaching approach and if they have other coaches in their midst that might want to come in and coach people in your practice. So just to have that bit of distance between the people that are coaching and being coached.
And you perhaps send one of your coaches into theirs.
It's a bit of a reciprocal arrangement. Yeah.
Or to get an external coach to come in.
Absolutely, yes. We'd be delighted to come in and coach Amy's colleagues. That would be lovely.
Absolutely. Okay, our next question is from Tim, who, as part of his role, engages in mentoring junior members of staff. And he asks, what's the difference between coaching and mentoring?
Good question. And I think it's a question that quite often comes up. Certainly within the medical world, mentoring is something that happens a lot. So many of the people that come to the doctors that come to our coaching course are mentors. There might be appraisers as well, but mentoring is definitely something that we notice people have some experience of. And so they're quite used to that as a way of being. And the difference that I see is that mentors will have some experience, they'll have some knowledge, and they will look to impart that experience and knowledge for the person that they're mentoring. So it's that giving the benefit of their wisdom and experience. Now, in the coaching room, we're not doing that. We might not necessarily have any idea of their world. So I have always said that I could coach Barack Obama. I know nothing about politics, I know nothing about his life in America, but I could sit down with Barack Obama and have a really good coaching session. I couldn't possibly mentor him because I know nothing about him. but I'd quite like that gig. I'd quite like to sit down and have a good coaching conversation with him. I draw the line at Donald Trump. I wouldn't want that gig at all, but that would be lovely. But I say I couldn't possibly mentor Barack Obama. So that's where I see the difference. Within a coaching room, we are looking for the person in front of us to come up with their own answers to their situation and to allow them to move forward. And I think if we do that, then we empower them, or we facilitate their empowerment so that they can move forward. And if they've come up with their own answers, they'll own that answer and they'll move forward with it in the way they want. If we give them advice as a mentor, there's a good chance they're going to be defensive and think, well, I'm never going to do that. They might not tell us that as a mentor, but they might think, yeah, no, he's got that wrong. That won't work for me.
So mentoring is, this is how I did it, and coaching is, how could you do it?
Yes. But I think there's a really good place for mentors to learn some coaching skills. And I'm sure that many of them have done some coaching in the past, but I think if you are a mentor and you've never done any coaching training, I think actually coming to a coaching course and learning some coaching skills would fit really well with your role as a mentor.
And there are some other more subtle differences between coaching and mentoring. So coaching tends to be over a shorter period of time, whereas mentoring tends to be for a bit longer.
Yeah, so I mean, traditionally, I guess I would coach someone for around 6 months. That's normally what happens. Maybe 6 to 12 sessions, but over a period of about 6 months. For a mentor, it could be a lifetime relationship. That's not to say I don't have longer relationships in coaching. I have one individual that I've been coaching for 8 years, and he just comes to me once a quarter, really enjoys that space where he knows he's going to be listened to, he knows he's not going to be interrupted, and he has an opportunity to do some really great thinking. He's not looking for me to give him advice, he just wants that space where he can stop and think.
So mentoring has its place, coaching has its place, but also there's a place for combining the two.
Yes, but only in one direction. So I think great for mentors to have some coaching skills and to be able to draw the answers out of the person in front of them. I think coaches need to stay away from mentoring, otherwise we blur the lines. If we're really serious about doing good coaching work, then we want to draw the answers out of the person in front of us, and that's not mentoring.
Excellent, thank you very much. Question 3 is from Kathy, who's emailed in, and she's really interested in coaching, and she's asking how long it takes to become a qualified coach. So Tom, how long does it take?
Well, on our coaching programme, it takes 6 months. So we have the Doctor's Transformational Coaching Diploma. It's 11 workshops and 11 online modules over a period of 6 months. And there's also some coaching practice to do, which could extend that period maybe to 9 months. But 6 months is possible to get a coaching qualification, and to have done enough practice and to have learnt enough to then feel confident and competent in the coaching room.
And that's obviously working it in around work and home life as well.
Yeah, so we have 11 half-day workshops, 11 online modules that people can do in between the sessions. Generally, our sessions are 2 weeks apart, so there's enough time and space for them to do that. And as I say, if they don't have time to fit in the coaching practice, that can always be done after the event. Once they've finished all of the workshops, they can carry on working towards their coaching practice and their qualification.
So there we are, Kathy, 6 months to become a qualified coach. And there is, of course, a link to our Doctor's Transformational Coaching Diploma in the show notes, so you can find out more about that course.
So let's move on to a further question from Susan, who is a coach in training and a GP. And she asks, how should I contract around confidentiality with my clients?
So typically confidentiality is absolutely ensured, but with a couple of exceptions. And those exceptions are that you as a coach are concerned there is a risk of harm to your client or others, or where there's illegal activity. Between us, with 21 years of experience in coaching, we've never had to break confidentiality, but it is important to contract around it. And that can be done in written form or verbally at the start of engaging with your client. Tom, you work a lot in organisations. That's where it gets perhaps a little more tricky.
Yes, and if we refer back to the question we had earlier about coaching colleagues, then that becomes difficult to ensure that any assurance of confidentiality is met. How can you possibly do that if let's say you were managing someone and they were telling you they were doing something underhand, not necessarily illegal, but were doing something underhand, you can't possibly not know that once they've told you. So what do you do with it then? You can't guarantee the confidentiality. So I think in larger organisations, obviously, they will have an internal coaching pool, perhaps. And certainly within the NHS, there are coaching hubs which people can sign up to be a coach within their organisation. And I think it's possible, but I think you have to be careful. It has to become part and parcel of who you are as a coach, that you honour that confidentiality and that you don't walk away and start chatting to a colleague about something that's happened in the coaching room. So I think it's important that you know what your boundaries are around confidentiality and that you're clear with your client around what those boundaries are. Sometimes I'm involved in three-way contracting where I will have a conversation with a client and their manager, and they will sit with me and discuss what they want to happen in the coaching room. I will do the coaching and I will ask the coachee to go back and report back to their manager about what has happened. I don't want to find myself in a situation where I'm on my own talking to the manager about what's gone on in the coaching room, because then you leave yourself open to breaching that confidentiality and perhaps giving something away that you hadn't intended to. So I think it's really important to have tight contracting. I'm a coaching supervisor, and most of the problems that come to me from coaches in supervision are there because they haven't done the contracting. And if they're contracting around confidentiality, it's generally because they haven't done the contracting right in the first place that we have problems.
So you wouldn't be accepting of a contract which required you to report back to the client's manager, for example?
No. As I say, I do a lot of work in organisations, and that's never been... It's been talked about, but it's never been something that I've accepted. So I will always make it clear to everyone involved that this is a confidential process. And just a few weeks ago, I had someone from an HR company that asked me what the outcome of the coaching was. And I said, well, feel free to talk to the coachee, the client, and they might well tell you what the outcome was. But as we've said at the beginning, this is a confidential process and I'm not going to discuss it any further.
Excellent. And confidentiality also covers storage of data that might identify the client, and that's really important as to how you keep your notes. So we'd suggest that if you're keeping notes, that they're anonymised or coded so that there are no identifying details on the notes and they're stored securely. So that's another element that you might want to communicate with your client through your contracting.
Yes, and making sure that you comply with any data protection regulations that exist in the area that you're working in.
Excellent. We'll be answering more questions from listeners on a regular basis. So if you have a question that's come to mind, please do send it in to us. There's a link to our website in the show notes, and you'll also find our email addresses. So just pop it on an email and we will add it to the list of questions. Next time, we'll be looking at our first topic that we would like to challenge in coaching. Is it ever okay to ask a closed question?
No.
And there you have it.
Excellent. So we will see you next time. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.